Welcome to the 54th episode of the Head Kick KO podcast. Today we are doing a breakdown of UFC 271, which was headlined by Israel Adesanya and Robert Whittaker. And after that, we're going to look briefly at next week's main card, which is going to be headlined by Jamal Hill and Johnny Walker. So we'll start right off at the top with Israel Adesanya versus Robert Whittaker. And unfortunately, one of the biggest things that is getting talked about in this fight is the scoring. And in my opinion, really, you only can definitively give Izzy round 1 and Rob round 5. So for rounds 2 through 4, I mean, I'm not going to argue with anyone who scored those rounds in any type of way, because I understand the case that you are making. I do think Izzy round 2 might be a little bit clearer, or round 3, excuse me. But you know, those are all really, really close rounds in there. So I'm not gonna get caught up in how did I score each round and why, because I really don't think it matters. And you know, this is a direct reflective of the way the rules are in MMA, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but this is one of those fights where we have to weigh what is effective striking. You know, Izzy landed a lot of leg kicks. Well, Robert Whittaker landed a lot of jabs. So how do those two balance each other? How do you score a takedown that, Rob takes Izzy down, he doesn't hold him down for very long, and he doesn't do a lot of ground control damage or get to a great position. And there's a couple cases where that's not necessarily true. There was a couple times where Rob landed some ground and pound. There were a couple times one time specifically where Rob got to the back. He didn't attack a choke too hard from that position, but that last statement was kind of an overgeneralization. But there are some times where Rob gets a takedown, great takedown, Izzy gets right back up. How do you score that? Because getting the takedown, that's effective grappling, and getting up, that's effective grappling. So how do you weigh those options? And at the end of the day, that all is personal, and that's on you. So I'm not going to sit here and debate who won each round, because I'm not too passionate about getting caught up in the scoring of an incredibly close fight. Now, to talk about the fight itself, Izzy had a great first round, scored a knockdown. That was the biggest moment of that fight. He landed some other good shots as well. In as much as Izzy does this in every fight, once again, landed a lot of really good leg kicks, and that really, hurt. I don't want to say it hurt Rob, but it affected him. You could clearly tell. And overall, I don't want to say I wasn't impressed by Izzy's performance per se, but I think he can do more, right? I don't think we saw all of his talent in that fight. There were moments where I see Izzy and I wish he would just throw another shot, right? They're in an exchange, and I feel like Izzy is in a good position to land a shot that could put Rob down, similar to in the first fight when he landed 2 shots. They're getting in exchanges, and he's able to land a hook that puts him down. And, I think there were some opportunities where he could have thrown some more of those. But at the same time, that's also putting him in danger, and he did win the fight. So at the end of the day, he won the fight. So I guess you can't be too critical. But in terms of chasing a finish, I think he could have done a little bit more. And, the same can be said, the same can be said for Robert Whittaker. I mean, Robert Whittaker landed a lot of jabs, and very rarely did he follow that jab with a right hand. Did he follow that jab with a kick? Very, very jab-oriented without much coming after the jab. So, as much as it was a close fight, and you can give Rob 3 rounds realistically, you can give him 2 rounds very, very, very reasonably, and that's probably the best scorecard. But, if he throws a couple shots behind a jab. If he lands a jab, maybe follows it with a hook, follows it with a leg kick, follows it with a body shot, anything. If he could just mix in a couple more shots, maybe he wins that fight. Because there wasn't necessarily a lot of action. So one or two good shots, solid shots in a round can really, really change who's going to win that round. Because at the end of the day, you got to win rounds if you're going to get out a decision victory. Now, the biggest takeaway from me in this fight is these are the two best guys in the world. I don't really see any debate in that. I think Jared Cannonier could be there eventually. He did lose to Rob once already, and you never know what's going to happen in that fight if he doesn't get hurt. But for right now, it's Rob and Izzy 1 and 2, and right now Izzy has just got the 2 wins, so he's in a much better position in terms of their futures right now. Now, I guess before we move on to kind of giving a breakdown of what's next for these guys, one more thing about Izzy is is so good defensively, right? He doesn't get hit a lot, right? Rob landed some jabs in there, but if you're really only getting hit by some good jabs, that's not really the end of the world, because he's getting hit by jabs, and possibly he could have defended if there were shots coming after you. It's hard to tell, but the way Izzy utilizes head movement and gets out of the way of strikes makes him really, really hard to beat. And I think that is the one skill that we've seen carry over from previous fights. In the Costa fight, for example, when he did get a very, very good finish in that fight, still, he was not getting hit, right? And, so he still has those abilities from some of his really, really memorable performances, but we're just a couple pieces short right now. And it's weird seeing Izzy in the state he is now. I guess, I did say we were going to talk about what's next for these guys, but we're going to get off the tracks for a minute, because I think this is a really interesting topic, because in Izzy's early run at 185 pounds, he looked unbeatable, right? When he took out Whittaker and when he took out Costa, those were tremendous performances that, after the Costa fight, the real question was, how do you beat this guy? Who can beat this guy? And I don't think we've seen the same fighter in the most recent fights from him. I know he got the wins against Vettori, and he got the win against Whittaker. He did lose to Jan. Obviously, that's up at 205. I'm not too worried about that, but it just doesn't feel the same watching him fight, right? Even though all the skills are still there, something feels off. And that's not to say he can't do it. Anderson Silva went through a very similar stretch in his career where Anderson Silva, had that bad fight against Damian Maia where Dana White walked out and, they considered that fight a failure because it was boring and Anderson Silva didn't really do much. So it's not to say that he can't come back, that's not what I'm trying to imply at all. But I just think it's interesting, and I think we need to see him again give us one of those performances, one of those classic performances, because we haven't gotten one of those from Izzy in a while. And while he's supposed to be the UFC's biggest star, we have, he hasn't been performing like it. If you look at Usman went to war with Colby twice. He finished Gilbert. He finished Jorge. Those were all tremendous performances. If you look at Charles Oliveira, he went to war with Chandler and gets the knockout. He goes to war with Dustin Poirier, gets the submission. If you look at even Volkanovski goes out there and he beats one of the best fighters of the last generation and the current generation, Max Holloway, and he goes out there and has an all-time classic fight against Brian Ortega. And you can go up and down, and I guess outside of 205, we're really seeing a lot of that in the champ. I guess that's an overgeneralization too, because 125 has been back and forth. 135 has been in peril, but Piotr Jan has given us great performances. Francis at heavyweight gave us a great knockout. The last fight wasn't a Francis-esque performance, but there were some knee injuries and things. So I find it real interesting, the position that Izzy's in. And I'm interested to see what these next performances from him are going to look like, because I think that the aura of invincibility that a really great fighter has really disappeared from Izzy. If you look at prime Mike Tyson or prime Conor McGregor, George St. Pierre, Anderson Silva at a time, all those guys had the aura of, you can't beat this guy. And Izzy had that at one point a couple of fights ago, and I just don't think that it is present anymore, even though all of these skills are still in place. So I think that is something to keep an eye out for, and that is something that I'm intrigued with, so I will definitely speak about that more in the future as things come up with that and we see Izzy fight more. Now, in terms of seeing Izzy fight more, he wants to fight in June, and the name is going to be Jared Cannonier. There is no question. We'll obviously talk about Jared Cannonier later as well, but he went out there and got a great performance had a great performance and got a tremendous victory, and that is what Jared Cannonier or Derrick Brunson had to do if they wanted to get this title shot. Go out there, get a finish. It's not easy, but it was a simple thing. You go out, do this task, a very hard task, you'll be rewarded. And I think Jared Cannonier will be rewarded, and he is the only guy in the top 5 who Israel Adesanya has not already beat. So I think it's going to be very obvious Jared Cannonier gets that next title shot, and I think that should be a fun fight, a very interesting fight. And Jared Cannonier, I'm interested to see his game plan going in. Will he pressure a little bit more? I'm interested. He was getting hit a little bit against Brunson, so that could prove to be concerning. However, at the same time, when you're fighting a wrestler, you can give up opportunities to get hit, right? If you're trying to defend a takedown and they come upstairs, you can get dropped. It happens. We'll talk more about that performance later, obviously. But Cannonier versus Izzy, I think, is going to be a fun build-up and a really fun fight. And I'm happy to see Izzy fighting some fresh blood here soon. Now, for Robert Whittaker, he's obviously in a very unfortunate position because he is the second best fighter in this weight class by a mile, from what we can tell at the current moment. He is in a very similar position to Max Holloway, where what do we do? And even Rob has already fought a lot of these guys. He fought Cannonier. He fought Cannonier, Till, and Gastelum. So, Vettori versus Whittaker could make a level of sense. You could do Whittaker versus Costa. That makes a level of sense. Those are both really fun fights. I think Paulo Costa, I think that fight would be tremendous as well. But you also have Sean Strickland in the mix, and I don't think we see Sean Strickland jump up all the way to get that shot against Whittaker unless the UFC is really trying to push Sean Strickland to a title shot. But they might look at doing Paula versus Sean Strickland, and then that could lead to Robert Whittaker versus Marvin Vettori. So I think that could be something interesting. However, at the same time, if you do Whittaker versus Vettori, is the winner going to get a title shot? That's something you got to think about as a consequence to that fight. So moving on to one last thing that I completely forgot to talk about is Israel Adesanya's takedown defense. Once again, Izzy proved he's a hard guy to take down and a hard guy to hold down. And while he does give up the back a little bit too much, it hasn't burnt him yet. Could it burn him in the future? Yes. However, you can see it done effectively. Jared Cannonier had a really nice get up where he turned to his back, got up. Key is wrist control. So I think that is one change Izzy can implement in his game plan right away. Is making sure we got wrist control when we're turning to the back and getting up. That's just one last thing I wanted to throw in there before we moved on to Tuivasa versus Derrick Lewis. Now, let me be the first to say I thought Derrick Lewis was going to win this fight, right? Tuivasa is someone who I respect completely, who I think is a tremendous fighter. But Derrick Lewis, coming into this, has had the most knockouts of all time, still does. Don't know why I said it in past tense, that's my bad. But Derrick Lewis has a unique skill set, and Tuivasa went out there and fought to that skill set perfectly. He did a very good job of, there were moments in that first round where Derrick threw some big shots. Ty gets it to the clinch. We're up against the cage. That's a success. And I think the most surprising thing about this fight was the chin. Because while Tuivasa won this fight, it wasn't perfect. He got hit a lot. In all honesty, Derrick Lewis probably landed more power shots than Tuivasa. And at the end of the day, Ty's chin just held up, right? Very, very impressive. In my opinion, he might now have the best chin at heavyweight. Usually when we talk about chin at heavyweight, it's usually, well, these guys throw so hard, they just get knocked out. Well, Tuivasa ate one massive shot from Derrick Lewis. I think he rolled into it a little bit, which helped, but a big hook from Derrick Lewis, whether you're rolling in or away from it or not, doesn't really matter. And that should put you out, but it didn't put Ty out. So credit to him. And the ground and pound that Derrick was landing, also very vicious shots. A lot of guys don't eat those shots, and Tuivasa did. So I think that's really impressive, and that could help him tremendously in future fights in that heavyweight division. And lastly, from that fight, the X's and O's of that fight, the elbows up against the cage, tremendous move from Tuivasa. When you look at that fight, they had some exchanges, right? They get up against the cage, and then Ty doesn't do it on the first exchange. He doesn't mix in the elbow on the first exchange, but eventually when he has him hurt, he mixes in a big elbow and knocks Derrick Lewis out. Very impressive. That's all I can say with that knockout. Love the way he set it up and hit it and put out Derrick Lewis. Now, what is next for Tuivasa? Very interesting. Because the heavyweight division right now, there's a lot of questions. We don't know what's going on with the people above him, and the people below him, there's a lot of guys who are booked up, right? We have a matchup between Blades and Chris Dauskas. That's 4 and 7. We have a matchup between Volkov and Aspinall. They're 5 and 10. And then Tuivasa will probably jump to 3 or 4. I imagine he goes to 3, but you can never be too sure. And then ahead of him, what are we going to do with Ngannou? Are we going to throw an interim title on the line? Who knows? If we don't throw an interim title on the line, is John Jones going to actually come back? If John Jones doesn't come back, does Stipe get the rematch? Because if they don't want to give Stipe a rematch, then you're looking at Tuivasa being the highest ranked guy outside of Gan, who Ngannou just beat, and Stipe, who Ngannou beat the fight before. So I wouldn't be surprised if the if the pieces move in a way that Tuivasa gets a title shot. With that being said, they could easily throw an interim belt on the line and give it to Gan and Miocic. Wouldn't be surprised at all. With that, they could wait for Ngannou to heal and give that fight to John Jones and book Gan and Miocic for a number 1 contender type dealio. So there's a lot of options at heavyweight, and Tuivasa is going to get a lot of interesting names run across for a fight, right? That Volkov and Tom Aspinall fight, especially if Tom Aspinall wins, you can match up Aspinall and Tuivasa, and then you're kind of looking at maybe, I think a win over Derrick Lewis is a little bit more meaningful than Volkov, but either way, still impressive. And you could have two really, really bright prospects who are now moved their way into contender status, and they'll both be in the top 5. You can square them off. Winner gets a title shot. So at the end of the day, what I'm saying is that there's a lot of questions at heavyweight, and the same goes for Derrick Lewis. Depending on where the pieces fall, there are a plethora of options for Derrick Lewis. And to give my prediction for where I think these guys are going to fight, I think they give Tai Tuivasa, in all honesty. I think I see Tai getting a title shot. I think that would be a thing the UFC would want to do. Tai's stock is so high right now. And Tai seems like a company guy who is willing to fight whoever, whenever. I wouldn't be surprised if they give him that title shot as the highest ranked guy without a loss to Francis Ngannou. For Derrick Lewis, if Tom Aspinall wins, I think they do Aspinall versus Derrick Lewis. Same reason they did Tai Tuivasa versus Derrick Lewis. Young guy, a lot of talent, match him up, and you get a chance to beat Derrick Lewis, move yourself to the top of that division. And that would also be a very, very big fight, and you're really increasing your name value. And then moving down on the card, we had Cannonier versus Derrick Brunson. And Brunson came in with the most Derrick Brunson game plan you could ever imagine, right? Wrestle, mix in some strikes. And in that first round, he won that first round, Derrick Brunson did. And with that being said, Cannonier was still doing a good job defending takedowns and not getting in bad positions, not staying on his back for too long. Even when Brunson got to a pretty good position, very, very close to full mount, Brunson still got up. So credit to him for that. And then Brunson gets a knockdown at the end of the first round, and I'm surprised he tried to go for a rear naked choke because you saw clock ran out. Maybe he could have got a finish if he went 4 more strikes. You can't really tell too much. But regardless, it gets to the second round, and Cannonier is able to find a finish. Now, tremendous finish. Once again, elbow. This was a Muay Thai elbow. They weren't up against the cage. So, Cannonier lands that Muay Thai elbow right to the temple and a really, really nice back fist. I like the way it was utilized. You're going through with momentum this way, and then you go back with the back fist. I liked it. It landed well, and you're not giving someone a chance to get off the hook, right? You're putting pressure on him, and that's exactly what he did. He puts pressure on Derrick Brunson. Tries to throw a head kick, and it really hits him up top in the pec area. If that would have landed on Derrick Brunson's chin, he would have been in a bad spot. Now, but it didn't, and Cannonier still able to land some good shots, get Brunson to the ground, and end this fight. Now, credit to Brunson's corner for throwing in the towel, and credit to the ref for stopping the fight, right? If you look at both of those decisions, ref made a very good decision, gave Brunson a chance to recover, but he wasn't able to, and Cannonier landed 3 good elbows, I think it was, very powerful, and the ref said, okay, that's it. Maybe he could have stepped in an elbow earlier, but at that point, you're really splitting hairs. And meanwhile, Brunson's corner throws in the towel. Also, I have no problem with it. He was unconscious when they threw the towel, so it's a fair move to make. And to me, throwing in the towel was very meaningful just because Brunson has talked recently about he's got 2 fights left, that being the first one, and he wants to leave the sport healthy regardless of the outcome. So I think throwing in the towel really cemented his opinion on that, which is a good thing, and that's something that not many fighters would do, and not many corners would do that for their fighter. So I think I'm very impressed and appreciative of Brunson and his corner for their understanding of, hey, I don't need to sit here and take 18 more elbows to the face when I'm unconscious, right? And after that, Jared Cannonier gets on the mic and gives a very electric post-fight interview. And that's going to do wonders for selling that fight with Israel Adesanya. I hope people watch that fight and then turn around and watch Israel Adesanya 2 fights later. And I hope they want that fight because that's the fight they're going to get. So Jared Cannonier did what he needed to do. Now, Derrick Brunson, on the other hand, he's got 1 fight left and he's going to retire. So I'm really interested to see what they plan on doing with him. I think the matchup that they would go with is going to be Jack Hermanson or Kelvin Gastelum. I think when you're looking at matchmaking, you probably don't want to do like a Brunson versus Paulo because you don't really want to see Brunson hold Paulo down, right? Because Paulo is someone who is very good in that division. Same with like a Whittaker. You don't want to see Brunson hold Whittaker down and just, do nothing. So I think that they'd be looking to give Brunson a match against someone that is also a good grappler and could also strike a little bit on the feet. That's the UFC's MO. When they're looking at matchmaking Derrick Brunson, they're going to go, oh, this is his retirement fight. Let's give him someone who can beat him, right? The UFC doesn't really like to see people go out on wins. Maybe they do a prospect. Maybe if Nasruddin Imavov or Muniz gets a really good win, they go in that direction. I imagine they wouldn't give him another really good stylistic matchup like a Kevin Holland, like a Darren Till, like an Edmund Shabazian. So I imagine he's going to get a good grappler next. And if you need more evidence, look at Roxanne Modafferi versus Casey O'Neill. Not really going to talk about that fight, but you have the retiring Roxanne Modafferi taking on an undefeated prospect, right? The UFC wanted Casey O'Neill to win that fight, get the name of Roxanne Modafferi on a resume, and Roxanne Modafferi rides off in the sunset. It's just the way it's always been. It's marketing. And then we're going to skip around a little bit. We're going to move to Bobby Green versus Hazrat. And Bobby Green is one of the fighters that I love watching, right? He is so quick. So quick. It's ridiculous how quick Bobby Green is. And I really like the way he strikes with his hands low because he can get away with that because he's so good defensively, head movement. He has a really interesting way of getting in the Philly shell on the fly when strikes are coming. Because in MMA, you can't really stand there in the Philly shell because you're going to get kicked in the leg, right? It's just something you can't do. And he utilizes it really well for MMA, good head movement. So he can fight with the hands low. He's good at it. And Bobby Green, the other thing I like is the hands are low and he's constantly moving in a very unique way. The strike's already coming at a unique angle because he's got his hands low. And then he's kind of doing this little dance and flinches and feints and really, really unorthodox movement. He almost has feints as a part of the way he moves in the octagon. Very interesting movement. And then you're sitting there going, okay, is he just moving around the octagon? Is he feigning? Is he throwing a strike? And then, you're like, oh, he's just moving around. And then you get hit with the jab to the face that came at you 100 miles an hour. Bobby Green, tremendous boxer. And I think he's going to do great things in this division. And I think he's on a really strong trajectory. Last loss is to, why can I not remember his name? Rafael Fiziev. So, it's not like he's out here losing to bums. So Bobby Green, tremendous fighter. I just wish he would attack the legs a little bit more, especially in that last fight. Hazrat did a lot with the hands high, and then I wish he would just mix in some strong leg kicks. And I see a really bright future for Bobby Green. Bobby Green is an incredibly talented guy, and I don't know if he gets a ranked opponent next, but it's going to be close. I could see Brad Liddell versus Bobby Green. That's a reasonable fight in my opinion. Also, I could see Bobby Green versus, a lot of guys who are outside that top 15 range. And that's just the way the lightweight division works, there's 15 guys who aren't ranked that you could make a case that they deserve to be ranked. So Bobby Green's going to have options. And then here, we're just going to do a quick rundown of the rest of the fights. Those were the ones I wanted to talk about in detail. Renato Moicano got a really nice win against Alexander Hernandez, so credit to Moicano on that. Andrei Arlovski continued to win. I think he's 5-1 or something in his last 6 or something like that. Let me double check here. Andrei Arlovski is 5-1 in his last 6, so Andrei Arlovski is in a really good spot in his career, and I wouldn't be surprised if you see Andrei Arlovski fighting a ranked opponent, not soon, but if he wins 1 or 2 more, you gotta give him someone ranked. Casey O'Neill kept her undefeated record against Roxanne Modafferi. Roxanne Modafferi is a legend of the sport. Hope she does well in retirement. Kyler Phillips, another tremendous fight. He is a tremendous fighter and very well liked amongst the MMA community for his skill set. And very, very good finish. Very, very strong. Izzy's teammate Carlos Olberg goes out there and got a win versus Fabio Chernat. And probably could have been a little bit more active, but when you walk away with a win, it's whatever. And then last one is Blood Diamond versus Jeremiah Wells. Blood Diamond's a kickboxer who they gave his... Let me just rephrase that. Blood Diamond is a kickboxer, and in his very first match, they gave him Jeremiah Wells. Not only can Jeremiah Wells knock somebody out, but he can out-wrestle you and submit you. And not a great first fight for Blood Diamond, a terrible stylistic matchup. So I don't think Blood Diamond is done. I think he should probably move to 155 pounds. He looked a little bit undersized. But regardless, I still think Blood Diamond is a very strong fighter. And Jeremiah Wells, on the other hand, he is looking good. I mean, his last 2 fights, rear naked choke win over Blood Diamond and right hook win over Warley Alvarez. I really like Jeremiah Wells. At 170 pounds, he's a big guy. I think that he can make some. He could possibly make a run at the top 15 in that division. And then looking at the top 15 in that division, just a quick side note, Shavkat Rakhmonov got his ranking, and he is now at 15. So expect interesting things from him in the future. That was just one side note that I just saw. Now, moving to next week's fight card, this is also going to be quick. There isn't a lot to talk about, but the main thing is the main event was supposed to be Rafael Fiziev versus RDA, and Fiziev couldn't get his visa in time, so they bumped that to 272, and it is now a 5-round co-main because they already signed a 5-round bout agreement. Now, Johnny Walker and Jamal Hill gets pushed to the main event, and they make that a 5-round fight. That is a fight that I love. I love Jamal Hill. I think he's a tremendous, tremendous fighter, and he is in a really good spot in that light heavyweight division. He's got 1 loss to Paul Craig, but I won't shame anyone for getting submitted by Paul Craig. With that being said, this is going to be a really interesting fight. I'm glad it's 5 rounds. I think that Jamal Hill is going to bring a fight here, and I think Jamal Hill wins this by KO. Now, being incredibly transparent, Jamal Hill and I are from the same city, so I'm incredibly biased toward Jamal Hill. But a lot of people love him and respect him who don't really have any reason to be biased towards him. So you just keeping that in mind. Now, some other fights. Joaquin Buckley versus Abdul Razak El Hassan is going to be a tremendous fight. Tremendous fight. Let me say it again. That's a tremendous fight. Now, this card doesn't really have a lot going for it. Not a tremendous card. David Onama versus Gabriel Benitez might not be a bad fight. Jessica Rose Clark is on this card. She's a fan favorite. Kristen Rodriguez, 7-0, is opening up the card. So I always look out for guys with zeros in their record. Kyle Dauskas is in the co-main against Jamie Pickett, and that shouldn't be a bad fight. And Kyle Dauskas is someone who was recently ranked, no longer ranked, but still a good fighter. And that is going to be it for this episode of the Head Kick KO podcast. I wanted to make it quick. I didn't want to keep us here too long, but thank you for listening, and make sure you tune in next week because we are going to be doing a breakdown of UFC Fight Night Jamal Hill versus Johnny Walker. Thank you.